Hi, I'm Joe Huss, a 25-year resident of Naperville and the NEST Energy Committee Chair. And this video is not our typical video that's meant for general audiences. This one's meant for people who want to take a very deep dive into our analysis showing our electricity vendor, IMEA. We paid them 43% more than the market rate, which we calculated that to be $34 million more in 2025 than we would have paid had we bought our electricity off the market. And for those of you who are new to this, the Chicago Tribune, NEST, and the city's consultant CJ Law all found IMEA's electricity to be more expensive than other communities are paying for wholesale electricity. We've updated our analysis through the 12 months ending November of 2025 and found that once again, IMEA was still much more expensive. Some residents have joked that IMEA stands for It's More Expensive Again. In fact, we know of no analysis that shows IMEA was less expensive than the market here in Northern Illinois. Before I get into the step-by-step calculations, we also did a sanity check on our market calculations. In Illinois, electricity prices are largely set by the natural gas prices. And here's a chart showing natural gas prices over the same time period that we looked at. And now we'll overlay that with the chart that the IMEA, with the market costs. And you can see that our estimates around the market costs for electricity in Naperville match up pretty well with the natural gas prices. So that gives you like a sanity check to say, yep, things look as you might expect. So um, I'm going to switch now and focus on how we calculate. First, I'm going to show you how we calculated the IMEA costs, and then I'll show you how we calculate the market cost. And we'll start with IMEA. So the first thing we do is there's a volunteer who takes, this is our electricity bill for December, and you can see there's some data on this on the bill. The first step then is that we'll take that information and put it in a spreadsheet. So you can see the information that was on that last um, document that showed the monthly bill had date in it, and like this tells us the billing month, the when we got the invoice, the demand. So all the information that's on the bill is then copied into this, and we do this. The volunteer who does this um, puts all this information in. It's one row per month, and so when we talk about the cost per megawatt hour, those are the cost per megawatt hour based on the IMEA bill um, over the last 12 months. So now we've got information on the cost per megawatt hour, and we also have the transmission costs and then the energy and capacity costs. So we take that information and then we put it into our bigger analysis spreadsheet, which is what I am showing right now. Um, so far, that's the kind of the easier part of the calculation, figuring out um, what um, what the IMEA costs are. So IMEA costs on, sorry to switch you on spreadsheet. So here we go. So we take the bills, we put them in that spreadsheet that looks at them per month. Then we summarize that into the cost per year. So each one of these rows is a different year, and this last one is 2025, and you can see the capacity. So IMEA breaks the bill up into two numbers, one for energy and capacity, the other for transmission. You add those two together, and that's how you get the $88.84 number. You can see it's a sum of those two numbers to get the 88.84, which is the dollars per megawatt hour from IMEA. IMEA's, that's fairly straightforward to calculate that. Um, And now we need to calculate the market price. And we have, unfortunately, there are dozens of columns of data that are required to calculate market price, and I'm going to walk you through that. So the first step to calculate the market price is to look at how much electricity we used in every hour of the year. So to accurately calculate what Naperville would have paid on the market, what we have to do is find out how much electricity did we use in a particular hour, and then multiply it by the price of electricity for that hour, because electricity prices um, vary all throughout the day, um, and depending on the weather, depending on a million different factors, the price of electricity will change, and it's unique, not just it's unique to um, different locations throughout the state. So um, Naperville is going to have a different price of electricity than Chicago would. So where we pulled our data from is the Naperville Nodal LMP. So LMP stands for Locational Marginal Price, which is the price of electricity in that particular location at that particular hour. So it was $38.22 a megawatt on December 1st of 2024. So we take that, we downloaded that information, um, and then we got the usage information. This is something the Naperville Electricity Department uploads, and then we downloaded. So this told us how much electricity the city of Naperville used in that particular hour. So you take usage times price to get what the total cost for that hour. So you got total cost for an hour. Now you have to add up every hour of the year. So that's why this spreadsheet has thousands of rows. So that's going to give us, we're going to get an annual usage number and an annual bill number based on the market. And again, so far, all we're talking about is, we're not talking about transmission or ancillary services at this point. We're just our straight megawatts per hour. So this gives us the number that we're looking for is what the weighted average. So if electricity was more expensive and we were using more of it, obviously that's a higher hourly cost. So when you add it together, that weighting is built into it. So it's important that you get the weighted average versus just the average cost for the year. So our weighted average was $36.99 per megawatt hour. So remember that number, because we did this cut, the volunteer who downloaded all this data, he's an industry expert with access to all this information, which is publicly available. So others could do the same if they had the knowledge in terms of how to do it. So downloaded all this information to calculate how much electricity costs in every hour of the day. Then so that's going to come over into the main body of the spreadsheet to show, so those numbers in terms of the hourly usage gave us information about our Naperville's particular usage over that time period. So then I'm going to start walking through the columns to show you how we calculate market rates. I just showed you where we got the energy information, and I showed you where we got the average price for electricity on the market through the entire year. So columns D and E are peak demand and transmission, and that's from data that's reported by the city to the ComEd PowerPath site, and we need that information to calculate the capacity costs. Column F, as I mentioned, is the average energy cost, which we got from that first tab, which is in that the tab was, if you want to go back in the video, you can see it's row 8762. Column G uses a blended rate for capacity because this calculation is so the spreadsheet that we've got is looking at an 11-month time period that ended in November. The PJM auction prices don't run on an annual year basis, but they run from June 1st to May 31st. So we had to blend 2 years capacity number to get the rate here for the calendar year that we were looking at. And these annual rates are publicly available, and you can see we put the website below, but we also included, you're going to see, these are some of the tables that we downloaded, publicly available information to get our like load contributions that we'll go over in a few minutes, and then in a minute I'll talk to you about transmission rates. And again, this information is publicly available, so we downloaded the transmission. So let's go back here. So we're up to column G. So G was the one that uses that blended rate to calculate the capacity price. And then H is the transmission price, and I just showed you the table, and that's publicly available where we got that data. And then I is simply the calculation that sums up the values, and there's a conversion as well, the units conversion. But this is the formula. It's not using, you can key that formula in, you'll get the same information. So that information gets us the energy and capacity. And if you remember, this is what our slide looks like. So this blue bar here is just the energy and capacity. It matches up. So this is the blue bar for IMEA, energy and capacity, and then this would be the equivalent blue bar for energy and capacity on the market. So this column I gives us the blue bar for the market prices. Then column J is a calculation of transmission. IMEA's transmission is, so where PJM's transmission costs are actually a little bit simpler to calculate because you have the transmission that you use multiplied by your rate. IMEA's transmission is based on a socialized cost formula. So we couldn't replicate that, but we don't have to because they put that number on the bill. When we compare our PJM costs, which is what we use transmission from PJM. IMEA pays for our transmission, but because IMEA uses a socialized formula, the cost that PJM would normally charge Naperville for transmission is not what IMEA charges us. So IMEA charges actually quite a bit higher for their transmission cost. But let me get back to this. So we just covered what the transmission cost on a dollar per megawatt hour is. And then the next columns, K, L, and M and N, are kind of some small ancillary costs that, to do a fair apples to apples, we have to include those costs in the market costs. And those are from a memo. So let me scroll up. So those are from this memo. This is from IMEA to the Naperville Electricity DART. So it's a much longer than the I'm just showing a snapshot of the cover of that memo. IMEA doesn't regularly provide that information to us, but on May 20th of 2025, this is a memo from Rakesh Kathapalu, who's the IMEA Vice President of Markets and Technology, to the Electricity Department, which included the data, so we can do an apples to apples comparison that includes all the services that IMEA is providing. And we aren't able to validate that number. That's not a number that is publicly available, how they got to that number, but we assume IMEA's data is correct. We can't validate it, so we're taking that IMEA information at face value. that gets us to column O, which sums up the transmission costs and the ancillary costs. And the ancillary costs are pretty small. So even if they weren't right, you're talking under $3 a megawatt hour in terms of that information that we got from IMEA. So not a big, it's not going to sway the numbers, significantly. You add the ancillary cost to transmission, and that's what column O is. And column P is what you get. This is the market cost when you add the transmission costs plus the generation cost together. That's the $62.20 per megawatt hour that you see on the slide that we shared. So if you take that 6220, you can see over here in column V if you take the difference between, we took the IMEA cost, subtract out the market cost, and then multiply by usage for the year. And then that's how we get to the $34 million in savings. And then you see in column V47, that's how we get to the $338 million, roughly $400 million in savings between 2014 and 2025. Our expectation is that that number would actually be much higher. It would be higher if we looked at the whole length of the contract, and we primarily believe that because we can see there's data that shows how much Naperville paid per year, but we don't have the detailed information to do the specific calculation. But you can see the year that we started buying our electricity from IMEA, our electricity bill shot up quite a bit because we were largely on market-based pricing before we went to IMEA through a power marketer. So that's how we get to the 34 million in savings and the 34% price differential. There's another slide that we share about transmission costs. So I wanted to share that and show you the background in terms of how we calculated that. So the chart in the middle is from the city. We copied out from the manager's memo in October, and you can see a pretty significant increase in IMEA's transmission costs. And I just want to highlight that we are on ComEd. We in terms of our transmission costs, that's coming through ComEd. It's on the PJM grid. So PJM is the transmission provider. When you look at year-over-year costs from 2019 through 2025, you can see that ComEd's transmission rate increases are about 2%. Then you look at IMEA, which is what we are paying, and again, this is the formula up here that we used it. We based it on the transmission costs that we pulled from the IMEA bill. You can see that our bills are increasing by about 12%, a little bit more than 12% per year. That was true last year. It increased 12%, and on January 1st of this year, IMEA's transmission costs increased another 12%. So the question is, well, wait a second. If Naperville's on PJM and they're the ones that are doing transmission, why are our rates going up much faster than PJM, the grid we're on? And that's because IMEA uses a formula. Some people call it the socialized cost. So the fact that most of IMEA's members aren't on our grid, they're on the MISO grid, which transmission rates are about double what they are on the Naperville's on PJM. Because their rates in Southern Illinois are so much higher than the rates in Northern Illinois, we subsidize the communities in Southern Illinois to reduce their bill. So Naperville ratepayers, what we pay for transmission, we pay for all of the transmission that Naperville uses, and then there's extra money that helps the other communities in Southern Illinois pay their transmission bills. So that covers the calculation, and I just want to hit on 4 points. First, it's pretty easy to show that IMEA is demonstrably more expensive than the market. And then second, that there's a lot that we can do to lower these costs, but we're limited by the IMEA contract. For example, I'd encourage staff to spend the next 9 years that we're on IMEA before we can exit the contract, pushing IMEA to give us more flexibility so we could do cost saving. There's ways that we can save costs, not hurt the other IMEA members, and save Naperville ratepayers money. And we would love to see that happen. And we don't have to wait for a new contract. We have to get some additional flexibility from IMEA. For example, we'd love to do behind the meter batteries. We can save ratepayers money. The third thing I want to do is really thank the amazing Naperville residents who are industry professionals and volunteered countless hours to collect the data to create this analysis. And it's the best information I've seen on our electricity costs. Um, and we encourage the city to do a similar analysis. We'd love to see the city maintain this data. It's a lot of work to keep it up. But as we make our electricity decisions going forward, having this kind of understanding of the bill and what our options are would be, valuable. And so in closing, Naperville made a bad bet on coal in 2007 when market prices were high and IMEA incorrectly forecast the cost of building generating assets. Naperville should not make that mistake twice and sacrifice its energy autonomy and flexibility by rushing into a contract that's already above market rates. And the projection by the CS consultants that the city hired was that these prices would almost triple over the course of the contract. We can get a better deal, so we encourage a conversation about the merits of various options. We should fight together for a better option rather than fighting each other. So thank you very much for your time. If you have any questions on the sustainnaperville.org site, which is the NEST site, I'm the energy chair. My email is on that site. You can send me any questions that you have. Thank you for your time.